Well, welcome to the Valley Football Blitz. Tom Nieman along with Jay Elsen, Brian Shawn up in Fargo. We get into the Missouri Valley Football Conference season this week. A couple of teams have played already, but the payday games are done. The Division II games are done. So let's throw up the standings here, guys, to take a look at first and any surprises overall to the start of the season for the Valley teams right now. Jay?
I don't think so. I mean, Northern Iowa, maybe, but is it a surprise with Northern Iowa? Because they kind of always panther a little bit at the very beginning of the season, and then they figure it out, and then they get on a roll later on. But, I mean, that would be the only one, as you look at it now, 3 games in, they're 1-2. They weren't competitive at Iowa State. They got blasted at home by Weber State. Then they went on the road and got a win at Idaho State. But so that one's a little bit surprising to me. And then on top of that, Theo Day has not been particularly good yet. And I went on record earlier this year and said I thought he was the best quarterback in college in the state of Iowa. Maybe I was really wrong. I don't know. But I still believe that guy could have a big year for them. But the rest of it is, kind of the heavy hitters up at the top: North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Southern Illinois, the North Dakota as well, certainly coming off the year that they did as well. Big log jam in the middle, and I think we're going to see that, continue to be that way the rest of the year.
Brian, you got North Dakota State in there, sitting at 3-0 right now. Are they a sleeping giant? Have we kind of forgotten about the Bison? They seem like they're just kind of the troll under the bridge that's ready to jump up and eat you.
Yeah, it's amazing how the number 2 team in the country and a team that's won 9 FCS titles can just kind of be this underdog or whatever it is, just because the team right down the road in Brookings has been so good here as well the last couple of years, including the national championship. But yeah, the Bison are still fine. I mean, they're really good up front. I think they've gotten healthy. I think they're a little deeper on the defensive line. Everybody was kind of wondering how they're going to replace some of the pieces on the back end and at corner and safety with some of the departures, both through the transfer portal and graduation. But Cam Miller, I think, has looked really sharp. I think Cole Payton has come in and provided a spark for them. They got a lot of different weapons. I really feel like they've opened up the offense a lot from what they've done in the past. Before it was always 22 personnel. We're going to run it at you 50 times. And I think they've spread it out. I think they've taken advantage of their athletes. And I think they've put the defenses in a lot of conflict, and it's made it very difficult for opponents to stop them. And I think their non-conference slate maybe on paper didn't look great. But now maybe that Eastern Washington win is going to look good down the road. That win against Central Arkansas is going to look good down the road. And so, when the rubber meets the road here for the Bison, they still have some tests down the road. Certainly at North Dakota should be a fun game, and out South Dakota State in November. But, I think they're clearly cemented as 1A right now in the Valley.
Bison have outscored their first 3 opponents 128-48. I mean, the offense is rolling right now. You were talking about that.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, while they have opened it up, I totally agree with that. They still don't have that headline guy at the wide receiver position, or they don't right now. It seems like there's kind of a mixture of guys that are all contributing in their own ways to that. But I think what they're still doing as well, if not better than everybody else, and you mentioned Cam Miller, Brian, I like actually what Cam has done with his legs, and he's always been an effective guy that way. But then you bring in Cole Payton to the mix too. The two of them have combined to run for 9 touchdowns already. Payton, as the number 2 guy, has at least 1 rushing touchdown in every game this year. So I think that creates a lot of headaches for these defenses right now, and is creating a situation where you have to respect literally everybody on the field and every aspect of the offense if you're a defensive coordinator right now. And frankly, the Bison are just executing what they want to do at that championship level that we've become so accustomed to seeing from them.
I think we need to put more pressure on them as the season goes along. They're just, like you said, they're kind of sitting there and nobody's paying a lot of attention to them other than in Fargo right now. But yeah, we know about the Bison. North Dakota, Brian, what about the start for UND so far? Was that a good win against Northern Arizona? They kind of hung at Boise before losing that game, but what about UND?
Yeah, I still think the Boise game was kind of the first measuring stick, and Northern Arizona were like, geez, NAU wasn't looking very good. Now they beat Montana at home last weekend, so maybe that's a better win than we think, or maybe Montana's worse. I don't know. But I do think they've always been really good at home. The fact that they were down, they had a lot of things go against them at Boise. They put the ball on the ground. Tommy Schuster was hit a lot, sacked 6 times. Some things kind of went awry with ball security. They dropped a couple of interceptions, one that would have been a pick 6. And you got to make those plays in those situations. But that being said, when they were down, they forced some turnovers and actually got back into that football game. We're only down 10 in the 4th quarter before Boise had a couple of explosive plays and put it away. But if anything else, those are at least things you can look at and say, okay, this is a real good test of where we're at and how our athletes match up. But talking to some of the defensive linemen and players, even at North Dakota at practice this week, they believe South Dakota State's offensive line is probably better than Boise's. So their work's going to be cut out for them this week, going on the road, taking on the Jacks.
Yeah, big game Saturday. We'll talk about that in a second here. But what about South Dakota? 2-1 right now. Defense really good in the last 2 games?
Yeah, really good in the last couple of games. And to be honest, after the season that South Dakota had last year and the schedule that they faced, how incredibly difficult that was, they got behind the 8 ball early and they just were never able to recover as a result. So coming into this year, knowing that the schedule was so much easier in terms of side-by-side comparison to what they'd gone through a year ago, you knew at this point to be comfortable, they had to be 2-1. And it hasn't been pretty necessarily. That offense is still a work in progress. They scored 24 points in a shutout win over St. Thomas, and then they put up 35 against Lamar in a 35-6 win there. But a lot of the damage they did on offense was in the second half of those games. So they've struggled a bit in the opening 2 quarters. But the other part of those scores is 0 and 6, right? I mean, they've given up no touchdowns in 8 quarters against FCS competition, which I don't care who you're playing. That's a really tough thing to do. Now, granted, it's a whole different animal when you're going to Fargo to open the Valley slate against North Dakota State. So extending that streak to a 9th or 10th quarter would be a tremendous accomplishment in its own right. But yes, I think that defense is really, really good. I think they're capable of doing some really big things for that team. And I think bottom line, they're good enough and consistent enough if they stay healthy just to keep this team in the game. And I think as you're trying to work in a new offense and get up to speed with Josh Davis running the show on that side of the football, that's really what you want. Is you want your defense just to give your offense a little bit extra leash, a little bit more time to get up to where they need to be to hit their peak form. And I think you're going to be in good shape because, yes, it's NDSU to start, but then they've got Murray State. They've got Youngstown State back-to-back at home. It's a good stretch right now. If they get some things figured out and they play a good game Saturday, who knows what could happen. But the defense, it's been solid to this point. We'll
have that game Saturday here on Midco Sports with North Dakota State hosting South Dakota. And as you said, it's South Dakota D, that NDSU offense that we already talked about that has expanded a little bit. That'll be the big match.
Certainly strength on strength there. And one thing that USD has not done in the series recently against NDSU, obviously outside of 2015 when they went to Fargo and shocked the Valley and the rest of the FCS world at that time and got a win with a team that ended up winning 2 or 3 games that season. Since then, though, they've struggled, and NDSU has beaten them by an average of about 30 points in the rest of the game since then. And one of the big things, Bob Nielsen says, in all of those games, they've struggled to possess the football. That's something they have to do. Last year is a perfect example. They went into half up on the Bison. Second half, Lipke and company kind of started grounding and pounding, going back to that old style of North Dakota State offense, and they wore the defense down. And the reason they were able to do that is because the offense wasn't able to get first downs and stay on the field. And so they've got to help. It's got to be complementary. Yeah. They've got to hang on to the football. Defense certainly needs to do its part, but the offense has got to keep the football for a while and shorten that game as much as they can and see what happens.
Yeah, 3 and out against the Bison.
Not a good deal.
Huge disaster. Another game we'll have here on Saturday is North Dakota at South Dakota State. Brian will be on the sideline for that one. And you're in practice, I think, today, Brian. What are they saying about the matchup against the Jacks coming up this weekend?
Well, they know it's going to be tough. The Jackrabbits provide a lot of challenges offensively, defensively. I believe it's going to be a sellout crowd out at Dana J. Dyke House, 80 degrees. I mean, it's going to be a great atmosphere. I think the one thing that maybe helps UND is they just went into a big atmosphere a couple of weeks ago against competition that was bigger, longer, stronger, faster, and I think had a better understanding maybe of what they're getting themselves into with South Dakota State. But this is going to be a major, major challenge. You talk about staying on the field. North Dakota has to find a way to get themselves in a third and manageable, because if they don't, the Jackrabbits are going to come after Tommy Schuster on 3rd and longs and really put themselves in very, very difficult spots. So having the offense hang on to the football, sustain some drives, the ability to run the football, I think is going to be significant. And then even if the defense bends a little bit against the Jacks, can they find ways to get stops in the red zone to at least force field goal attempts and not give up touchdowns? I do think the Jacks are going to be able to move the football in between the 20s, but can UND stiffen up when it matters? Can they force a couple of turnovers? Had 3 against Boise in the loss out there a couple of weeks ago. So, Yeah, they're the underdogs. There's no question about that. But this is a tremendous opportunity for them when they open conference play.
Yeah, there were 35,000 at the Boise State game, something like that.
Yeah,
it was a big crowd, right?
Yeah, it was a good crowd, good atmosphere, beautiful setting, a lot of blue. A lot of blue out there.
The field is ugly, man. All right, but South Dakota State, Adam Bach is supposed to be back at linebacker for the Jacks this weekend to add to that defense for South Dakota State. He's missed the first 3 games, kind of nursing a foot injury right now. But SDSU's had the 2 romps over Western Oregon and against Drake at Target Field, and then that win over Montana State 20-16, which looks better the more you look at it for what Montana State is doing. But maybe one of the worries for the Jackrabbits is the offense hasn't had a ton of snaps. The first team offense anyway. Isaiah Davis only has 24 carries in the first 3 games, so they haven't had their studs out there a lot of the time. But this is going to be a great matchup on Saturday with South Dakota State at North Dakota. 2 other matchups. Let's get a quick thought on that. Youngstown State at Northern Iowa on Saturday. UNI, if they lose this game, they're 1-3.
Boy, that's real interesting, isn't it? All of a sudden. Meanwhile, if you're Youngstown State, where do they keep digging up these running backs? Well, Division II is the answer. They found another one in Tyshawn King out of Northern Michigan, and he's rolling up big numbers, about 300 yards on the ground already, and just kind of plugging him into the system. And he's doing exactly what Jaleel McLaughlin has done for them the last couple of years. And so that'll be interesting because UNI has struggled a little bit defensively, and that's been a big part of their problem on top of all the other struggles they're having on all the other side of the ball. So. Yeah, that's a really interesting matchup, given where both those teams are right now.
Tyshawn King leading the Valley in rushing right now. Gavin Zebarth at North Dakota is 3rd right now. Bo Belquist at North Dakota is leading as far as catches a game. He's got almost 8 catches a game right now. But another game coming up on Saturday. Quick thought, Brian, Missouri State at Southern Illinois. Missouri State, if they lose this one, they're 1-3, kind of playing themselves out of it. But Southern Illinois can get to 4-0 and kind of keep things rolling.
And Southern Illinois is going to be a team to watch. They got the FBS win. They got a win over a top 15 opponent, in Southeast Missouri in kind of a dramatic fashion. So if this team can find a way to get to 5-3 in league play, which I think they can, all of a sudden you're looking at 8-3. They could be borderline even seed material, for SIU. And again, they're going to have their opportunity against the top dogs here, but North Dakota doesn't play them. So they miss a couple of teams throughout. But this is a big game, I think, when you talk about for Youngstown, for them to beat UNI to really kind of solidify themselves. But Missouri State, I don't know if there's a team that we had a more unclear knowing of what was going to happen with a new head coach and Petrino moving on, very transfer-heavy program. I think maybe they've slipped a little further than what we thought they would here in this first year under this new regime. But that being said, going on the road, they roll up a bunch of points in the second half. They've just really struggled defensively. So I think that's going to be their challenge going to SIU because the Salukis could be 4-0 and in really good shape here once they hit the month of October.
I tell you one thing that I've really noticed about Southern Illinois is the difference defensively. 3 games so far, they haven't given up more than 25 points, including a season-low 11 points allowed in that FBS win over Northern Illinois. And so we're so used to offense and explosive plays with the Salukis, and they're still doing some of that. They're playing a lot better defense all of a sudden, too, and that could be the difference between them going 8-3 and maybe settling for a 6-5 or 7-4 or something like that.
Illinois State, the league leader, has a bye this week, and then they play host South Dakota State coming up in 2 weeks. Brian, we will see you in Brookings coming up on Saturday. Should be a blast.
All right. They appreciate it, guys. Looking forward to it.
All right. We will see you in Fargo with the Bison and the Coyotes coming up on Saturday as well here on Midco Sports. That's the Valley Football Blitz. We'll see you next time.